Hey everyone, you're watching Lit Sports Online. We're going to be talking about UFC Fight Night 153, Gustafsson versus Smith. It's a preview episode, and we're going to get right into talking about the top three fights on the main card. They're all light heavyweight fights. Should be an interesting card. But we'll start with Jimi Manuwa versus Alexander Rakic. Manuwa's on a losing streak, only won 3 of his last 8 fights. But all of his opponents, well, most of his opponents are either title holders or title contenders, so not as bad as it sounds, but still noteworthy.
Yeah, I definitely agree. Manuwa's hit a bit of a rough patch. He came in, he's an exciting boxer from England, and so like he came in and just had a lot of success, kind of like the sprawl and brawl style, where it's just his whole game was stop the takedown and keep it standing and keep putting pressure on and counter-striking well, and he just ran into, Anthony Johnson and Volkan Oezdemir and Thiago Santos and everybody who's fighting for titles or has recently fought for a title, and so he's hit tough times, but he's just been fighting the best fighters in the world, and he's just not able to hit that top 3 or 4 spot. But they keep giving him kind of style-friendly matchups, and they're giving him strikers. So this is where you expect to see him either kind of shine or, I guess, sink a little bit, because like they're giving him guys that want to do what his specialty is. So they're not giving him guys who are going to take him down and stuff. So he should be winning these if he's a specialty striker, you would think.
Yeah, so his style is more of like your classic stand-up striker, strong takedown defense. That's kind of what he goes for.
Yeah, he's a really strong, powerful boxer. He's from England, where they, in the older days, didn't have a ton of grappling. So the stereotype of English guys being good at boxing and good at kickboxing and stand-up fighting, but not that good at grappling, applies to some extent, I think, as far as what people think about his skills, but it's also true. He's just, his style is specialized to be a boxer, basically. Like, he was a professional boxer, I believe, before he was an MMA fighter. So that's just what he does. And they're giving him another like style-friendly matchup and giving him Rakic, who's a young kind of striker who's like 11-1, I think. And the guy has a pretty good diverse striking game. He's powerful, he's young, he's fast, so he's on the rise. It's kind of your classic veteran guy that we've seen a lot on the out, and the new younger guy coming up. So this is one of those fights where I think if we see Manuwa lose this one, I think he'd probably be cut from the UFC if 4-5 losing streak. This doesn't look great. But like I said, classic scenario: young up and comer, grizzled vet. End of one guy's career is the beginning of the next.
Yeah, and if it was WWE, it'd be like putting him over, but of course this is not fake, so...
Yeah, and so Manuwa has the opportunity to go out there and change it. If he goes out and wins in exciting fashion, then good for him, and I hope he does. He's a fun guy to watch, and even if Rakic loses, he'll stay in the UFC. He's an exciting young guy, so you never know. We'll see what happens, but it's just telling of where Manuwa is, I think it's a turning point either way.
And then moving on to our next fight on the main card, we've got Volkan Oezdemir going up against Ilir Latifi. And you got basically a classic matchup of a grappler versus a wrestler.
A striker versus a wrestler is what I meant to write there, but...
A striker versus a wrestler.
I was thinking about both of them. Anyway, Oezdemir is more of a power striker, big shots. He those big round punches. He has knocked out a ton of dudes in the division. That's kind of why he got a title shot so quickly in the division, was because he came out and just had impressive finishes where he landed big shots on people. And then he went on and fought Cormier, and it did not go very well for him. Cormier kind of dismantled him pretty quickly, and then he came back. He fought Anthony Smith. Anthony Smith was able to out-grapple him. Anthony Smith is not known for being a great grappler, but he out-grappled Oezdemir. So I think that could be one avenue that he may have trouble in against Latifi. Latifi's a big, powerful wrestler. He's a real stocky guy. He likes to throw like real big, long overhand and looping shots on the feet, so he has power in his hands. He's pretty quick for how big he is, but he's just a really powerful guy. He's super strong. He's built like a fire hydrant, and his takedown game is great, and his top control game is great, and I think that we could see Oezdemir have problems with that if he can't keep Latifi out at range. And Oezdemir is pretty good at that because he's kind of taller and lankier, and he has a nice reach, and he has big power in his hands, so guys are a little hesitant to just kind of leap in close to him. You know, they're going to have to get past his fists at some point. So they're pretty careful about where they take that risk with how much power he packs. So that's how he keeps people on the outside and makes them play his game.
But what is it about this fight that classifies it as a co-main event? I mean, does this have real implications? Who wins this? Are these two guys pretty high up in the light heavyweight division?
Yeah, well, light heavyweight's an interesting division in that all of the guys, the three biggest players in the division are Gustafsson, Cormier, and John Jones. Cormier is seemingly exited the division. At heavyweight, he's the current heavyweight champ, is likely to retire after he defends his belt against Stipe again, unless he gets a big money fight after that. He wants to fight Jones again. Who knows if that'll happen, because Jones has basically cleaned out the top of that division. And like, he beat Cormier twice, he beat Gustafsson twice. Those are the only two people that most journalists or fans really see as a threat to the belt. And since he beat both of them twice, now we're seeing guys like Anthony Smith get a title shot after beating Rashad Evans, Shogun Hua, and I can't remember who the third guy is, but beat three guys. He came up from middleweight, beat three guys in knockouts, so it's exciting fashion and big finishes. So he got a title shot where in other divisions it would take a little bit more than beating kind of washed up ex-title holders, you know. Rashad Evans and Shogun, all very old, very weathered in the sport when Anthony Smith fought them. And the same thing with like Thiago Santos, and even the same thing with Volkan Oezdemir. He came in and kind of got a couple of big wins and big knockouts and earned his title shot against Cormier. And so, since the division's kind of thin, Oezdemir is still right there at the top, even though he's on like a 2-fight losing streak. He's a bigger name in the division. And Latifi is a guy who's always at like, 6 to 10. So he's always near the top, and he kind of beats a couple of the middle guys, gets up towards the top, and loses one. So whoever wins this fight potentially breaks into the top 5 and gets their next fight could be a number 1 contender fight. You know, their next fight could be against whoever wins Anthony Smith versus Alexander Gustafsson. Both those guys are coming off of a loss. That's almost a number 1 contender fight, except that they've both lost to John Jones recently, so nobody really wants to see that unless they have something exciting happen. What's more exciting than having 2 fights back-to-back, if they both get, say Latifi goes out and gets a huge knockout of Volkan Oezdemir, and then Anthony Smith gets a huge knockout of Alexander Gustafsson, Latifi or Smith just calls out the other guy. They both fight back-to-back on one card, then call each other out, put them in a number 1 contender fight. That guy fights John Jones next. That's a good storyline. It's a good setup, right? So it has implications, even though these guys aren't right at the top right now.
And then as for the main event, Alexander Gustafsson versus Anthony Smith, as you were saying, John Jones' last 2 opponents, and, didn't work out so well for either of them, but hey.
Yeah.
So you're saying this is not necessarily a number 1 contender fight then?
I mean, I think either guy after this win will say, I want my next fight against Jones. But really, there's not many, especially with Alexander Gustafsson, he's lost to John Jones twice. The first fight was John Jones' closest fight by far. Everybody... It was up for debate as to whether Gustafsson beat Jones. I've watched it multiple times, and every time I watch it, I kind of go back and forth. I think Jones won it, but Doesn't really matter. He won it on the record books. And then he just fought Jones not long ago and lost via, round 3 TKO. So, looking at that, you go from, okay, you lost once, and it was close, we get it, you earn the rematch with a close fight, but then he finishes you in round 3. Like, that's not, it doesn't look better for you. That doesn't build your case to get a third fight with him. The outcome was worse. If it was a super close fight again, maybe. But it wasn't. Most times you don't see the third fight unless they split the first 2 wins. With Anthony Smith, if he gets a huge finish of Gustafsson, goes out there and looks phenomenal, maybe we'll see him get put right into a title shot. But the decision against John Jones was a unanimous decision anyway, and John Jones had 2 points taken off. So even with 2 points taken off for an illegal move that Jones did, he won the unanimous decision. And so it was a pretty one-sided fight, even though Anthony Smith went the distance and did look pretty good. He looked as good as you could look against John Jones without getting finished, you know. So I don't know if either of them earns a title shot right from here because of how good John Jones is, which is why this division is kind of so thin and relatively stagnant to an extent. Like, not many people are clamoring for these light heavyweight fights right now. The only one you really want to watch is John Jones. I mean, I personally am excited for this fight because I like both these guys. They're both phenomenal. It's an interesting striking matchup, but John Jones just holds that division like hostage almost.
So what else is it about this fight that you would say makes it like what should people be looking out for when they're about to watch this fight?
I think this fight will be. I think people might find it a little boring, but it'll have moments of really fun interactions. I think both these guys can tend to be relatively cautious in their approaches. Anthony Smith, since he's come up to light heavyweight, tries to counter-strike a little bit more because he is a size disadvantage that he wasn't when he was at middleweight. And so he still has that tendency to like to pressure guys when he feels them fading a little bit. He's like more cautiously aggressive at this point. He waits for his openings and then has big bursts of aggression and forward pressure and big shots, and he throws kind of unorthodox shots, and he kind of runs forward while he does it, so he's really good at kind of covering distance. But Alexander Gustafsson is really good at covering distance in a different way. He has better footwork, better boxing, just better technique, and he's a longer guy, and his steps are just bigger. So while he will back straight up to the fence in a lot of cases, he also will circle out of the way and start to land combinations on people if he feels comfortable enough to kind of stand in the pocket. And so I think that we'll see a kind of a timid fight where both guys are trying to feel each other out. And it's good. I think it will be kind of, you know, very chess match strategy striking type of fight at the beginning, at least, until both guys start to settle in and just start throwing bombs. I think it'll be a very exciting fight after that, but I think it might start off kind of boring. But I think it's Alexander Gustafsson, who has power in his hands, but is kind of a better technician and more of a volume striker, versus Anthony Smith, who, while he does have good technique, a lot of his game is just that big power shot. So it's kind of the one-shot finish in Anthony Smith versus the guy who's just going to pick you apart for a whole fight in Alexander Gustafsson. And I think Gustafsson does hold a grappling advantage, too, if he does want to take the fight to the ground, but he tends to like to stand. So I think it'll be kind of an exciting striking match.
Okay. So, I mean, should we predict the fights just for shits and giggles, or?
Sure.
I mean, we're going to end up doing a recap of this?
Yeah, we'll do one.
Okay. So, I'm going to go with Alexander Rakic on the first fight, Latifi on the second fight, and Anthony Smith on the third fight.
Man, you took what I was going to do. But I'm going to do Rakic, Latifi, and just because you picked Smith, I'll say Gus. Go with Alexander Gustafsson. I think Smith might catch him, though. I rewatched the finish against Anthony Johnson when Anthony Johnson caught Gustafsson. And if Gustafsson, I think this fight is big. A big determining factor of this fight is going to be Gustafsson's mindset. Sometimes he goes in there and he's just not in it. And I think if he's in one of those moments, like, if he goes in there thinking he's the best in the world, like he did, like his confidence sky high against John Jones and a couple other people, he's almost unstoppable. But if he has that question in his head of, like, should I retire? He's got one foot out the door. I think Smith might catch him.
Well, I would just rather see Smith ultimately get a rematch with John Jones if it comes down to one of them getting a rematch, because I mean, a guy that lost by unanimous decision just once versus a guy that's lost to this guy twice, you know.
I would like to see both, honestly. Like, I would like to see Gus go get a crazy finish and then look phenomenal and come into the Jones rematch sky high, you know. But same with Anthony Smith. If he does the same thing, that's just as exciting, man. Plus, I just like Anthony Smith. He's just a real, like, down-to-earth, level-headed dude. He's real kind of collected and articulate in all of his, like, interviews, and it's just kind of, like, refreshing. Like, he looks like a savage, but then you hear him talking, you're like, what? What's going on here? He doesn't look like he sounds. It's pretty funny.
So anyway, that's our preview for the UFC Fight Night 153, Gustafsson versus Smith. We hope you liked it. Make sure to give the video a like, subscribe to LitTube, and also check out our description because we've got our website and some other things in there for you. So stay tuned.
Alright, gentlemen. Pat's Super Special UFC Hour in 22 minutes or less, featuring Justin rolling in 5, 4, 3,